Thank you. Thank you. I feel kind of warm inside now. Thank you. So, as Beth said, we're going to talk about pitching and rolling, improving your pitch process, improving your sales process, and improving your proposal process. And I'm hopeful that this doesn't tip over. So we've already asked a whole bunch of times whose first time is at a WordCamp this time, so I'm not going to ask that question. Caught you on that one. I'll ask a more general question. Who's having a good time? And of those who are having a good time today and who are here today, obviously I'm asking you folks, who had such a good time yesterday that they decided to stay today? They didn't originally have plans to be here for 2 days, but decided to stay because of yesterday. We got to have at least one. That is awesome. Yeah, Anthony, I don't believe that for just a second. So you might have noticed I'm wearing a very silly mustache. And I don't normally wear a very silly mustache. I normally wear a beard because it's easier than shaving. But I'm doing it to raise awareness for men's health. But see, because it's Movember, right? People are familiar. But over the course of the month, when I would go out and meet prospective clients or clients who I hadn't seen again in some time, I would always forget that I had this silly mustache on. And I'd get back in the car and be like, oh, they think I wear this silly mustache because I like it. So then I would have to send an email like, I don't normally wear that. So I'd come into losing the exact point of Movember. I'm totally not failing at that. But I wanted to get that out of the way early since I don't have all your email addresses and can't email you later to say I don't normally wear this. All right. So I need you folks to be honest with me. Let's all just appreciate that honesty is the best policy. And nobody is in this room because they want to be here. Writing proposals sucks. You don't like it. And so you're here to try to figure out and make it better. Right? All right. So let's everybody just take a deep breath and we'll say it together. Liam, I don't want to be here. Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Liam, I don't want to be here. Excellent. So now I know your expectations are really low because you don't want to be here. So the rest of the talk is gravy for me. Thank you. Since you're being honest with me, I want to be honest back with you. And I've been working for myself for 10 years. And I've had an employee for 7. And the bad news is writing proposals never gets fun. It will never be fun. But as your pitch process gets better and you get smarter about the way you write proposals, you draft proposals, the writing process, the proposal process will become more rewarding. You'll be more successful at it. And I actually really, really, really enjoy the sales process. I really enjoy going out and meeting new people, learning about what's troubling them, what their problems are, what their business is, and chatting through whether or not my business is the right fit to help solve their problems. So now we're on the same page. Honesty is good. So let's talk about who's here today. Who is a business owner? Who in the room owns a business? Excellent. Excellent. And who's a freelancer? You can own your own business and still be a freelancer. I get it. Excellent. Agency employee? Excellent. And who, regardless of your role, who in the room has primary responsibility for sales and proposals and that kind of stuff? Oh, excellent. A whole number of you. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So I think hopefully this will give us a great venue then to have a fantastic conversation about this. Does anybody know these folks? I do, not personally. The older gentleman is Bill Caskey. The younger guy is Brian Neal. Bill and Brian run a podcast called the Advanced Selling Podcast. The Advanced Selling Podcast. I was first introduced to the Advanced Selling Podcast in late 2012 when I was doing some design work, some consultancy work for a sales coach. They were focused on the dental industry, and in the process of creating a website for them, kind of picked up some sales tips and coaching advice along the way. And these guys have a podcast, and it's absolutely a fantastic resource. And the reason I'm mentioning them today is because their whole approach is one that I learned to embrace, adapt, and make my own. And for them, for Bill and for Brian, their sales approach, their pitching approach, starts in the head. It's all in the head is where they start. And they call it the inner game. Bill's 6'3" and change, and I think he played college ball somewhere at a smaller school. And Brian's actually now an NFL ref. So they have a lot of sporting references that I don't quite understand. But they call it the inner game. And that's what I really want to start this talk with, is talking about the inner game. Because like many things in life, if we're going to get into it, we've got to get into it with the right mindset. We've got to have a healthy approach mentally to what we're trying to achieve. And if we don't have that, getting the results we want out of the project or the task is always going to be a massive challenge. So the mental preparation beforehand is really what sets pitching and proposing up in a way that will lead ultimately to success. So for Bill and for Brian, their inner game has two key aspects. It's a mindset of abundance and of detachment. Abundance and detachment. I think I initially said attachment. I didn't mean to. Abundance and detachment. You need both. One without the other won't work. The other without the one won't work. A mindset of abundance and a mindset of detachment. So what do we mean about a mindset of abundance? It's really committing yourself to believing that the work that you want to do, the projects you want to take on, whether it's building a website, designing a website, developing a website, writing copy for a website, shooting video to put onto a website, regardless of what you're doing, being mindful that there is a massive need out there. And the way that these guys describe it that I think is really helpful is what if everybody in the world who could possibly use your services suddenly wanted to hire you? What would that look like? Anybody, what would that look like if everybody that could use your services wanted to hire you? Yeah, exactly. It would be overwhelming. You'd have to close up shop, and it would be kind of exciting when the first few emails came in, but then eventually it would freak you out. But that mindset of abundance, being deeply aware that the work is out there, enables us to approach things positively. Now, we might not be getting it in the quantities that we want, but we can work on that. It's not because it's not there. We might need to tweak our game. We might need to shift our focus, but it's not because the work's not there. Detachment. Typically, we hear about detachment in a religious or spiritual kind of context. And it's really not that different from a sales and a pitching and a proposal perspective. And really what it means in this context is that when potential projects come across our desks or somebody introduces us to a mutual contact and that contact starts telling us about something that they're looking for our exact help on, it's maintaining a level of emotional separation from that project, and perhaps more importantly, because we're human beings, separation from the money that project, if we were to win it, would put into our pocket. So it doesn't mean we don't care about winning the work. It doesn't mean that we don't want the work. It doesn't mean that we're not willing to kind of get excited about it. But it's having a healthy emotional separation from that. The value that we bring to our work and to our industry is not tied to that one project. And if we don't get that one project, our business will not fail. And if we don't get that project and maybe our business does fail, that does not mean that our self-worth has decreased in any way. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's take a little side. Does anybody recognize this picture? I'm in a room full of a lot of computer geeks. Somebody, anybody? Nailed it! This island is a little island just off Ireland. And in the 11th or 12th century, an order of religious monks went out there and built a little monastery. And if you Google the island, and I can't remember what it's named, Craig Michael or something like that, Force Awakens Island, Luke, you'll get it. And you can see it's probably maybe 3 times as big as this room, and it just goes almost straight up, and it's very remote in the sense that you can only get there by boat, you can't swim, and it's not a very hospitable place. And these monks came out in the 11th or 12th century to deliberately detach themselves from the world. So they were physically separating themselves so as to not become emotionally and spiritually attached to it. We don't need to move to a small island in the middle of nowhere to maintain detachment from our projects. But if we can kind of remind ourselves, if we start getting too focused on what that extra money might be or how that will cover the bills for this month, and we haven't gotten that yet, that's important. And it's particularly important, in my experience, to maintain this level of detachment, especially when cash is tight and projects aren't there. And if you're in business long enough, cash will eventually be tight and projects will be spare. And hopefully you'll ride that storm, as Auntie was saying yesterday, have some money in the bank to ride those, but they will happen. You know, even Apple has slow times. Now they have $150 billion in offshore cash, it makes it a little bit easier. But all businesses go up and down, and having a detachment is really, really helpful. And part of the reason is we like to work with successful people. I think we've all encountered people in our respective marketplace who had an air of desperation about them. They wanted it, they needed it, they were absolutely willing to do everything to get it, but not in a healthy way. They weren't winning it based on service, on effective communication. They weren't winning it by demonstrating their best foot forward. They were very emotionally attached to the project. So this mindset of abundance will help us project an image of success. And if that's not an image of success, fastest athlete beating the rest of the world's fastest athletes and taking the time to look at the camera and smile. That is awesome. So once we have this mindset of abundance and this mindset of detachment, we are mentally then able to begin the process of pitching and of selling and getting involved with people about their business conversations. How can we help them? What needs do they have? How can we be of help? I think I did this twice. There we go. So as we begin the sales process, as we get into pitching, it's really about communication. It's absolutely about communication. We have to communicate early, we have to communicate clearly, and we have to communicate nicely. For those of you who were in Lauren Jeffcoat's talk yesterday about customer service, she made a real point about always talking nicely to people in the marketplace and the value it has. I absolutely think it's the same thing when and I realize I'm getting a little bit third first, but I wanted to reference her talk because she raised a really valuable point, was that when we're having conversations with prospective clients, or even clients who come back to us for a second or a third time and want us to do a little bit more work or to expand this or build this out a little bit, we may not feel that ultimately it's a good fit for us, but we want to make sure that we talk about it and tell them that in a nice way, in a way that makes them go away happy and say, I'm glad that Liam told me that he wasn't a good fit for this, because I would have hated to get into this and then regretted it. But to address the other point is we have to communicate early. Right from the start, we've got to start asking questions, very detailed questions. We have to listen to what we're told, not to what we want to hear, but to what we're actually told. And we have to make sure that we're communicating very, very clearly. I think we've all had experiences where we finish a conversation, we get back in the car, we get off the phone, or we finish reading the email, and we say to ourselves, well, I'm pretty sure they wanted us to go this way. But I can't tell if they kind of want us to go that way. We have to take the time to clarify that. Because sales process, sales pitching, a big, big part of it is managing expectations. So the mindset of abundance, the mindset of detachment manages our expectations. Clear, effective communication manages the expectations of our clients or our prospective clients. In my experience, and I've written a lot of proposals, the headache of writing proposals is not actually writing them up. It's the mental games, the mental questioning, the conversations that my colleague Lauren and I have. What do we think they want? What do we think they need? And if we don't know what they want or what they need, that's where the stress kicks in. Because we either then have to include all sorts of caveats around what we think they want, or we forget to include those caveats and we put in a proposal and they say great, and then we start to, we take the deposit, we get into the work, we say, uh-oh, that's not at all what they wanted. They want about 4 times that. So we can reduce that stress of having to try to of guessing what they want by communicating early, communicating clearly, communicating effectively. And then the process of actually writing the proposal is just writing down what they told us and what we want to do about that. It becomes a simple, I don't want to say production job, because we still need to think about it, but it takes the guesswork and the headache and the fear out of it. For me, one of the best tools for communicating early and quickly is a telephone. Yes, if we can meet in person, that's great, but a lot of us work remotely. A lot of us have clients that are in other parts of the country, the world, that, you know, for initial conversation, we're not flying to London to see whether or not they want to hire us. So I've included a photo of an old-fashioned telephone, but it could be a Skype call, it could be a Zoom call, it could be a Google Hangout. But at the very least, if we get on the phone, some form of oral and or video communication, we can cover a lot of ground. We can hear tone of voice. We can get an assessment as to whether or not they're organized, they're disorganized, they're distracted, right? We've had those conversations where the person's phone keeps going, or their text message, or their email, or we hear them typing tons of things, and they keep saying, hold on, hold on, hold on, hang on just a second, I gotta get this out. That might be a sign that we don't want to write the proposal in the first place. And if we think about how quickly conversations can go, yesterday Dwayne did an improv talk, and if you're in the room and you had the opportunity to listen to the conversations that people were having, they went very quickly, very fast. And they covered ultimately a lot of ground. And if we think about how quickly we speak, how quickly we can listen, you know, that's a lot of email back and forth. So a 5-minute conversation could be an hour email, or a half an hour conversation could save 3 weeks of emailing back and forth. So use that technology, use that medium to ask questions directly. Because the other thing about phones that emails don't have is we can do tone of voice. So we always have to ask about money. We have to ask about money. But we can ask it in a way that isn't threatening, that doesn't put people off. We could even say, like, this is always the awkward part, but I'll go ahead and say it, money. We have to talk about it. I'm guessing since we're on the phone, you probably want to spend some. And since I'm on the phone, I kind of want to make some. But then that opens the door and we can have the conversation. And we need to have the conversation initially, particularly if we're small businesses and we know that we can be flexible in what kind of work we want to take on. You know, we might not want every project to be 2 or 4 hours max capacity, but as a small business, in the right settings and depending what our production timetables are, that 4-hour job with the right client could be really helpful. It's not going to pay the rent. It's not going to put the deck on the back of the house, but it fills the 4 hours that we didn't have filled next Tuesday afternoon. And so if we ask about it, we can say things like, hey, we've built websites for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. But when I was first getting started, you know, I also helped my church out for $500. And one of the real beauties of web technology is we can deliver a solution, some kind of help, based on what your budget is. So let's talk about what are you prepared to spend? What do you have? What are your thoughts on that? Have you looked into it? What do you think you want to spend? And my point is not to cover every bit of language or example that you can say, but you can see none of this is confrontational. None of it is, you need money or I'm leaving, or you need a lot of money, or I want to name my vacation home after you, or that project, right? But we have to talk about money. And if we get asked about money, we need to be prepared about that as well. We need to be able to, sometimes when we get asked to give a ballpark number, what's this likely to cost me? And we have to think about that. We have to think about a number. One, if we've had the experience doing that particular project that they want, we have to know what that's likely to cost. And we have to think about a way that manages their expectations, right? We don't want to say it's going to cost $100 off the cuff because that's the number that felt good to us. And then we sit down, we take a little bit more time, and realize, holy crap, it's $350. So either I've got to go back to them and almost quadruple the cost, even though it's $100 to $300. It's not a huge amount of money, but percentage-wise, it's massive. Or we do work that we don't really want to take on at a rate we don't want. So if you're going to give ballpark numbers, be comfortable in them. Give yourself an out. It's going to be 1,000, give or take 15, 20%. Or if you're not comfortable with a ballpark number, that's perfectly fine. It's very easy, again, in person, over the phone, where you can lend your tone of voice to it to say, you know what, that's a really good question. Overall, it's not that complicated of a task, but there's a number of different elements to that. Why don't I do this? Why don't I wrote down the specs, I know what the work you need, let me look into it, let me get back to you. And in fact, I'll get back to you and you open your calendar, you flip to the website with your calendar on it. I can get you an answer by Tuesday. I've got some time Monday afternoon, I'll get you an answer by Tuesday. So you're not committing to anything you don't want, but you're managing their expectations. You're letting them know that it's not building a rocket. You're saying it's not that complicated, but there's a number of steps. And you're letting them know when you're going to give them a number. You're reducing their stress. We have to talk time. And I mean this in timetables, production timetables. So when do you want your website live? When do you want that brochure designed by? By when do you want that brochure designed? Because that's clearly going to affect price. It's also going to affect our ability to get it done. If they want it Tuesday, and they want a fully fledged multi-site with all the whistles and bells, they might have enough money to do it, but if our child's birthday party is this weekend, I'm not taking it regardless of the money. Or maybe Junior will celebrate next weekend because they're going to pay that much money. But we have to know. We have to know, right? And we also need to know what their business calendar is. Who's had clients say, we really want this live, we really want this live, we're totally ready to go, we've got all the content, we've got everything. So you say, great, 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 and you get all excited, and you get the deposit, you get working, and you say, okay, send us all the content. And you don't hear from them for weeks. Sorry, it's a busy time of the year. And then because you structure your projects where you take a deposit, you take an initial payment, and then a final payment on launch, depending on how things go, that cash you expected at the end of November is probably not coming until January. Because we didn't say, when are you busy throughout the year? What is your industry calendar? When can you get us content? When can you make decisions? How long does that take? We have to talk about time. And because it's all about managing expectations, we really don't want our written proposal, whatever format it takes, and we'll get into that in a bit, we don't want that written proposal to be the first time that client or those prospective clients have some indication of what it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. It should, in fact, reaffirm what they already expect. At some point in the process, we should say, it's going to cost about 10 grand, or it's going to cost 500. And then if it's 620 or it's 450, that's okay. But we don't want them to say, go away at the end of our kind of discovery process. In their mind, because we didn't talk about it, they're thinking 1,000. And when we get back to our office, we think, oh yeah, that's a 5 grander. Because they got this issue and that issue, and I don't know what the state of their data is, so I need to give myself a little bit of flexibility. It's going to be closer to 5. And so they're thinking 1, and we're thinking 5. And then they see that. Well, crap, that's a lot. But if we had managed that, they might say, well, I get that. I get that. I understand that. That's less than because they had said 5, give or take 20%. Well, we're right at 5. Or maybe we come in at 49.75 when we do all our numbers. This is over a decade of experience of writing proposals. The more time we spend talking to our prospective clients about the project, the less time we spend writing the proposal. The less time we spend fretting over it, the less time we spend worrying about it and stressing about it. So this looks better on my screen than it does in this light, but this is the stars at night. And so as we look up into the stars at night and we say, what do I actually want to put in my proposal? Now that I've kind of done all this discovery, I know what they want. I know what they need. I know whether or not I really want this. They seem organized, they seem nice, they seem proficient. I'm in step with what their business or their organization is trying to deliver. What do we want to put in our proposal? We want to start with the story. And I don't mean that it needs to be once upon a time. But we're sending over a document that we want somebody to read. So let's make sure that it has a flow. Let's make sure that it's something that, okay, it's not going to be gripping. They're not going to scan it and post it up on their website and say, best read ever. But at least we want them to get some glimpse about who we are, what we do, and how deeply we understand the prospective project they've brought to us. I can't tell you the number of times that I have won projects just when they say, you know, you're not the cheapest. And politely they tell me you're probably not even the best designer. But when we read your proposal, we knew it would be the easiest working with you. You got what we needed. You delivered us something very professionally. And we know that you will meet our needs. And I can live with that. I know I'm not the most creative. I'm not the best designer. We have to include all the deliverables and milestones. This is about managing their expectations and ours. And Auntie talked about this yesterday. Document what they want us to do, tell them what we're going to do, and tell them how we're going to do it. So that when they come back, if they come back, we can say, well, actually, that's not on our statement of work. Or that's not in what we agreed to do. Look at the email that I sent you on Tuesday, the 19th of June at 3:42 p.m. That list. We have to detail the costs. And my experience is to do this in as transparent a way as possible. If we think of our own buying experiences, whether or not we're buying services or we're buying something off the shelf at a store, we don't mind paying for quality, but we want that price to be explained to us. Not necessarily that the clerk has to stand up next to us and document everything. But when the plumber comes to our house to fix the toilet because it's not working, he doesn't say it's going to be $5 grand and leave it at that, right? He might say it's going to be $5 grand because I'm going to be here for 3 days. I got to rip this out. I got to replace this. I got to pull that out. Go ahead. Yeah. So in the interest of time, I might hold off on a really detailed answer to that question until the end. But what I will tell you is what I do is break everything down. Gravity Forms is this plugin is that, this is that, this is that. And I break down our work tasks into 2 to 4 hour sections, and I document that. So maybe the overall particular project or ad, let's say we're at Advanced Gravity Forms, and let's say it's going to take 2 full days to do it. We won't just say 2 days, we'll break that down into 2 4-hour blocks or whatever it breaks out to be so that they can see why we're charging what we're charging. So we don't just send them design 10,000, development 15,000, plugins 600. We break it down so that they know what we're charging and why. Does that make sense? Yep. Production timetables, hugely important. Make sure you also include that if they don't get to their timetable. So if they don't deliver their content, they're this, they're that. That will include allow, or at least kick in, or go brain go. That will possibly mean ramifications for your ability to deliver, right? We're small businesses. If they take 3 weeks to get us the content they promised in October, that doesn't mean we're sitting around waiting for them. We've taken on other work and we might not get to it right away. So we want to flag that up sooner rather than later. We definitely want to include some information about our workflow. How do we do stuff? Not necessarily that first we open Photoshop and we drag things around, but how does it interact with them? How are they going to see us working? What are we going to need from them? Where do we want them to engage with us? And depending on how particular you want to get, how do we want them not to engage with us? Additional or ongoing costs, as we were talking about. You might not want to take care of the website after it's done. You just design, build, and set them on. But let them know that that is going to happen. They will pay for things ongoing, or they're doing it wrong. Or they'll pay a little every month, or they're going to pay a lot down the road. So let them know about that. Again, managing expectations. And then, of course, from a legal protection standpoint, we definitely want to reference our terms and conditions. They don't need to be in the proposal, but just a simple line like all of our commissioned work is subject to our terms and conditions. Very simple, very clean, but it lets them know there's a professional operation. They got terms and conditions. Lawyers put them together for that. Okay, great. Make sense? Okay, cool. So I use 3 proposal formats. And I didn't always have 3. But over the last several years, I've developed these 3 based on experience, feedback, and trying to get better at the game. And when I initially started to take on bigger work, bigger projects where I wanted a more advanced proposal, it used to be just a nightmare. I would spend 8, 10, 12 hours crafting this proposal, trying to get it right, trying to include enough so they really understood that I understood. And it just wasn't an efficient way to move ahead. I couldn't spend 12 hours and not get it. 12 hours for a $60,000 project? Maybe. 12 hours for 10? Starting to cut in. So in 2013, early 2013, I eventually just said, all right, this is silly. I'm going to actually write this out as much as a template as a guy who can't be asked to implement systems ever creates a template. I spent a lot of time on it. I probably spent 30 or 40 hours all told putting this, what I call, full-on proposal together. And I'm going to go through it in a minute, but what used to take me 10 or 12 hours, I can now knock out in an hour or 2. So that time over 2 or 3 years has absolutely paid for itself. And I don't have any statistical data, but anecdotally, my full-on proposal has about an 80% acceptance rate. And part of that is because I'm asking the questions up front to know if it's worthwhile doing the big proposal. But part of it also is because I spent the time together to put it together. So I've got 3. I call it the full-on, the focused, and the simple estimate. And I'm going to walk through them. I'm going to walk through them kind of quickly, just in the interest of time, and to give you folks some chance to ask some questions. So my full-on proposal is very detailed. Talk a lot about the scope. I talk a lot about how we were introduced to the client. I talk about what their company or organization does, and I talk about why they need it, mostly why they want a new website. What's the current website not doing well for them? I have all sorts of details, probably a page and a half or 2 pages of what WordPress can do, so they don't have to look it up online. It's all in there. I talk a lot about our process, how we're going to interact with them, how we do our discovery, how we walk ourselves through the creative process, and how we're going to hold their hands as we go. Get very detailed as I talked about in answer to the question. We really break down the costs to try to be as transparent as we can be. It ends up being about 8 or 10 pages, 8 to 12 pages, sometimes longer. And we really only use it for bigger projects. And for us, it's still small in the grand scheme of things, but 8,000 kind of range and above up to about 2025, we'll use this proposal. But I should also say we also ask in that initial conversation, so what do you need to see? Depending on the business owner, they might say, I just need a number, send it to me. So there's no point in doing 8 to 10 pages if they just need a number. And I've got a couple other versions that I can show you that we get into. So our focused one is much shorter. 2 to 4 pages, as you can see in the bullet point there. And it's really for smaller projects, kind of something 3 to 5, 3 to 6, 3 to 8. And what I was finding is somebody with these smaller projects, it wasn't efficient to send them that long of a proposal. And frankly, they didn't want to read it. All they wanted is a little bit of information, something they could feel good about, and then what is it going to cost me? So we still talk about the project. We highlight what WordPress can do, mostly as it relates to what they've told us they want their site to do. We absolutely spell out the deliverables, costs, and timetables, and we use it for small to medium projects. Our one-page estimate, generate this in Harvest. And I will still break down the deliverables and the time costs, but it doesn't come with a story. Don't include anything about WordPress. And it's really just an estimate. And typically it's a few hours, but I had one 8,000-pound website. I talked to the business owner and his general manager. They're out of UK, waste management firm on the outskirts of London. And I've been working with them for a few years. We had a couple hours on the phone together. And I got to the end, I'm like, well, what do you guys want? I'm like, well, just get started. Like, well, we're humans. We get silly and weird around money. Let's do something. So I sent him a one-page quote. And they emailed back, yeah, that's fine. So in the right place, it does the business, because it hits what we're going to do and how much it's going to cost. And at the end of it, they don't say, hey, we want to pay you $4. And I say, no, I want 8. We go back to the number. But everything talks about milestones and deliverables and costs. We have to get those in. That's the bulk of it. So when I put in this application to speak, I knew very much that I wanted to talk about pitching, proposing, and the sales process. I really enjoy sales. I didn't like it until I decided that I wanted to like it. And I started listening to the Advanced Selling podcast, and I really, really enjoy it now. And when I was kind of trying to put together the application, that phrase, pitch and roll, popped into my head, and I said, yeah, that's it. And I applied it, and I got accepted. I was all excited. And then I started to Google pitch and roll, and I realized that the phrase probably only has meaning to me, because it has to do with airplane flight dynamics. There's pitch and roll and yaw. And really what I mean by it, as I'm wrapping up this talk here and kind of trying to recap what we've covered, is that what I mean is we're throwing our pitch, we're putting our proposal in, and we're just rolling on to the next task in our to-do list. We have a mindset of abundance. We know that if we don't get this project, we will get the next one. And if we don't get the next one, we'll get the next one out there. It is just a matter of time because there is that much work out there. And so there's so much work, we can maintain that mindset of detachment. We don't need this project. And in fact, by maintaining that separation, that emotional distance from it, we're better able to evaluate whether or not it's a good fit for us. And in that mental game that we prepare to start to get into these conversations about whether or not we should take this work on and whether or not we want to do it, we can communicate very clearly and effectively with the people who want to hire us or may want to hire us. And once we get that communication process to the point where we really, truly understand what they want, we can then analyze whether or not we want to do that. And if we do it, we can then submit a proposal in an efficient and an effective way. Thank you very much. I welcome questions. Go ahead.
When you're using one of your focus or one page how do you lock in customers to requirements and kind of prevent scope creep if you don't detail what they're getting in the written format?
Well, it depends on what it is, right? So, I mean, if it's a bigger thing, then we're going to go with a bigger proposal. But if it's like, hey, can you add a basic gravity form? We want to have, you know, name, email, yada, yada, yada. That's the kind of thing we do often enough. The risk of that exploding is pretty small. And so the time assessment, the time of putting that all together for such a small 4-hour project isn't worth it. Because we're also even for a 4-hour project, I'm going to talk to the client about it. It's like, yeah, I mean, we're going to add the plugin. We're going to need to do it on a development site because it's live and we want to make sure it does. Even a simple form, we want to make sure it works. So it's going to do this, it's going to do that, and it's going to do that. And it takes about 4 hours. And then we put that in the estimate as well. Now, if it's going to get more complicated, or if there are things that come up in that initial conversation that we say, this is something that we need to document in a proposal, then we can and we should. So these 3 different formats that I use are akin to each other, but they're not truly interchangeable. There's a time and a place. And what I'm finding more and more is that the more I pay attention, I can document what I need to be documenting, adding emphasis here, because this is the 3rd time they've said that, and that's the 3rd time I've had to correct them. Now, it's not actually how it's going to be. Then we put that in writing kind of thing. So really paying attention to what they're saying. Yes, and then these are, which slide? Yeah, I'll put these online. They'll be online at slideshare.net/Liam Dempsey in about 15 minutes. Auntie had his hand up first, and I'm going to come to you then.
So with pitching and rolling and the certain level of detachment, how much follow-up do you do with the clients after submitting your proposal? Do you kind of like bust it out there and see if it sticks, or do you follow up and try to get it?
No, I absolutely follow up. How much I do really depends on what was the, I'll call it ambiance of the relationship as we went through. How big a project is it? And what kind of communication did they tell me? There are definitely those that take a longer time. And I will dig it out and I will put it on Twitter that Brian and Bill have this book of emails, and they have this email format for when exactly that, they're not getting back to you. And you have to use it smartly and wisely, but every time I have used it, I've gotten a response. So I very rarely have a project that I want go completely missing. They might come back and say no, but at least I can close that door comfortably, happily knowing that it's over. But yeah, it's all kind of scale, economies of scale. We had a question over here, the gentleman in the hat. Haha. I was afraid someone was going to ask that. And here's my thought is, I'm not entirely convinced that I'm ready to open source them, my proposals. But what I will do is after this talk, you and I can exchange contact information. We'll follow up and have conversations about it. But part of the reason I didn't want to open source it is it's very, very reflective of how my business works and how Lauren and I as a company have developed in how we work. And so our language and our flow and our communication is us. And as creatives, whether we're creatively writing code, drafting copy, doing photos or design, we're constantly telling people, don't use a template, don't use a template. I mean, yes, there's some value in some structure, but you got to make it your own. And that's kind of where I'm emotionally conflicted. But yeah, I'll absolutely follow up with you. I'm going to come here and... Yes, Word, and then PDF it and send it out that way. Evelyn.
How much time do you spend in the discovery process?
Depends on the scope. It can sometimes be a 15-minute call, and that's not a good fit for us. You know, thanks so much. I don't ever say we're not a good fit, unless they're really, really jerky. But you know, I can say things. Yes, but I haven't overly formalized them. The questions are around, what do you want me to do? How much money do you have? When do you want it by? Where does what you want me to do fit into the entirety of your business? And how much involvement do you want in this project as a customer? So those are the kinds of things I'm trying to get at in a call. So it could be, let's talk 10 or 15 minutes. Evelyn, this is really exciting to me. I don't have time for this rest of this week. We've got to get some other stuff done. Can we talk in a week? And when I do that, I want to give you homework. You said you want your website to do these 3 things, but you're not sure. Can you have a think about it? And can you just send me before our call next Tuesday, can you just send me your thoughts on that? Don't worry about making it all formal, but send me your thoughts. And by doing that, by forcing them to do homework, we can test their emotional commitment and their willingness to work and all that kind of thing. Does that make sense? They can still spend time emotionally exploring it, intellectually exploring it. It depends. I'm happy to, but I don't want to take calls all day for projects that aren't going to go anywhere. So if I can put them on the back foot, again, politely, respectfully, and say, get into the game, and then we'll see if we want to play more than a couple of things back and forth. And if they're not even willing to do that, then it might not be a good fit. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
So do you send out a proposal to get a contract, or is your contract simply kind of
Separate.
inclusive?
Separate. But our proposal, the milestones, the deliverables, pretty much copy and pasted directly into a statement of work. So yeah, absolutely. I didn't always do it that way, and I realized I'm wasting my time doing it twice, so in the proposal will absolutely make the list of deliverables and dime tables effectively a statement of work. Question over here, or a statement over here. Yes.
So you do that, like
Yes.
based on how they're, like the terminology that they're using?
Yes.
Even if it's not the correct terminology.
Right. Yeah, so spending a few minutes on their website, talking to them. I will not send any proposal. I might do a one-page estimate, but I won't send any proposal to somebody I didn't talk to.
And then like the order, like do you find the RFP, you actually change the order as well?
No.
You don't change the order, and like when I get RFPs, I mean I was always told like put those things in the same exact order that they have them, because they're government.
Yeah, I don't work with a lot of government. Not in this country. I used to do.
Yeah, I just did one proposal that way. That's what I was told.
Yeah. No, yeah. So government, I don't know. I'm not going to answer that, but I very rarely respond to general RFPs. Like, hey, we're trying to collect quotes. Can we get one from you? I very rarely even respond to that. I mean, I'll write back. I don't mean that, but I won't take the time unless I can get on the call. If I can get on the call, and it's clear that I'm the 3rd quote or the 4th quote to meet the numbers, I won't submit a proposal. So it's that 5, 10, 15 minutes on the phone saves me hours because I'm not going to write it. Or if I want to write it, I can say, you know what, this is risky because I don't think I'm going to get it. But that would be kind of neat because I want that. I don't really need this project. I kind of don't want that, but that will get me an into them. So I will spend the time writing that somewhat risky proposal, trying to get that work so I can get there. Does that make sense? So it's having a strategy of, if you don't think you've got a good shot, but there's something else beyond it, or there's something about it that you want, then do that. But do it knowing, again, with a mindset of detachment, you're probably not going to get that project in the first place. But if you do, then it gets you that much closer to where you're trying to go. Anybody else? Thank you very, very much for your time. Appreciate it.